We are hybrid. We actually have 2 people in person. And it's great to see you. Shabbat Shalom, almost Pesach, and it is Shabbat Hagadol, the great Shabbat for Pesach. So this is very exciting. And we have 2 people here in person, which is wonderful. And we're going to, I don't really need to look over there, do I? No, just look here. Okay, the chat is open. And please keep yourselves muted unless I call on you. And in order to be called on, just raise your hand on Zoom, if you know what I mean. But if you go like this, someone might notice you and they might not. And that's it. I'm excited to study.
Can you click off the, are you seeing that?
Some technical issues here.
Yeah.
Why isn't this working?
There you go.
Okay, got it. Okay, great. So yeah. All right. So Alan, who's here, is going to recite the bracha. If we could just, Zoe, if you could just screen share, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. Amen. Blessed are you, divine source of the universe, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to engage and soak in your sacred wisdom. Okay, so today I want to do something ambitious, which I guess is appropriate for Shabbat. Shabbat Hagadol is a big Shabbat. So we're going to have a big project today, and the big project is this. I was like, okay, Shabbat Hagadol, Pesach, Passover's coming, but we're in this crazy parsha called Mitzorah. And, for me, I have to say that over time and over study, it's less and less crazy and it makes more and more sense. But on first reading, it is certainly insane. I wanted to make a connection between Pesach and this parsha about leprosy, or not mistranslation leprosy, but that's the English word I'm going to use right now, some kind of skin affliction. And I went to study all over the place. And I finally found a reading that worked for me. It's not my own reading. It's from Rabbi David Fohrman, Fohrman. The source is on the page. I think it's fascinating. I'm going to do my best to give it over. But if it doesn't make sense to you, at the end of this, listen to the video, okay? And we'll talk. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going all over the Torah. We're in different places. We're going to be in Exodus. We're going to be in Numbers. We're going to be in Leviticus. So we're going to do some traveling, and hopefully we're going to have some fun. Let's see. All right. Sharing my screen. Okay, so as you see, it's Shabbat Hagadol, Shabbat before Passover, and the Parsha of Mitzorah, or about the leper, or the one that afflicted with a skin disease. And what my intention today is I hope that this will help us prepare for Pesach. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to take us back to some of the passages we were looking at last time, last Shabbat, when we were talking about breaking open time and the quality of time for a slave and for a free person. But today we're going to look at some of the same texts, but from a different slant. So just to ground us here, if you recall, if you were here last time or if you studied this, the laws for Pesach, the first instruction for Pesach Seder happens while the Israelites are still in Egypt, still in that sort of, condition of slavery. And they actually, in a sense, celebrate Passover before there's been any, passing over. So let's see how that looks. So the context is this. Exodus 11:1, Vayomar Adonai el Moshe, Od nega echad avi al Paro, v'al Mitzrayim acharechem yishalach etchem mizeh. Oh, that's outside. Kishalcho halal garesh etchem mizeh. And God said to Moses, Adonai said to Moses, I will bring but one more plague upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt, and after that he shall let you go from here. Indeed, when he lets you go, he will drive you out of here one and all. So what I want to bring to your attention now is not only the context of Pesach happens, or the instructions for Pesach happens right before the last plague, but that the last plague is not called a Makkah. It's not called Makkah. How do you translate Makkah, Alan? Besides plague. A strike. Thank you, a strike. Sorry to put that on the spot. I think the people who are here with me, I can put on the spot. The word that's used is nega, and that same word, just to give you a hint of what's to come, is used for the skin affliction that we're about to look at, right? So before Leviticus, where we look at skin afflictions, the only place that this word occurs is here, is in terms of the last plague. So that's the frame. Interesting, right? Yeah. Okay. Good. I like the sounds of affirmation coming from in-person rooms. Excellent. Like a nogea. Like a nogea. Exactly. Okay. So now let's go back to Exodus 12, which again we looked at last year. We're not going to look at the whole thing. I just want to sort of paint the broad strokes and speak a little bit to the literary symbolism, which I think is really powerful. So God tells Moshe and Aaron to speak to the community. I'm in verse 3, leadership of Israel, and this is source 2 on your page. Speak to the community of Israel and say, oh, I'm sorry. Zoe, did you put the source sheet, the link for the source sheet in the chat? I'm going to assume you did.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so and say that on the 10th of this month, each shall take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household. Like who had each sat with big above that love Bible. Okay, not going to do something like this. It's not about today, and we did last week. We didn't do it here last week. Don't worry, we're not skipping anything about today. So your lamb shall be without blemish, a yearly lamb. I'm just getting the basic details down. You shall keep watch over it until the 14th of the month. Verse 6, and all the assembled congregation of Israel shall slaughter it at twilight. So that was verse 6. Kol kahal adat Israel. Shachatu oto kol kahal adat Israel. Bein ha'arbayim. So one of the crucial things here is that this is not an individual right. This is a family and community right. And actually, as we see other places, it's crucial that the right of the Paschal lamb, that each Israelite participate in that. And if they don't, they're not considered part of the community. And that's why there's a second Pesach Sheni, right? So there's even been, like with no other holiday, is there a second holiday? But it's so crucial that every person does this in the Israelite community, in the Jewish community, because if you don't do this, then somehow you're not considered as part of the people. And I think it's because, right, and we're going to get to more of this, that this is the birthright for the nation of Israel. Okay, so that I'm going to show you more about that in 2 minutes, literally. But it's crucial that this is the beginning of the Israelites going from slavery to becoming a nation. And becoming a nation is sort of a crucial part of being free. Like freedom and nationhood coexist, or freedom and being part of a collective coexist. It's actually interesting because often we think about the freedom of an individual. This is the opposite association. Freedom is associated with the collective. You want to say anything? No, okay. Somehow I felt like you did, but I was wrong. Okay. Okay, so now, what are they going to do? They're going to take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintels of the houses which they are to eat. So what do we have here? We have a bloody doorway. We have a bloody entryway. We have a bloody exit way. We have a bloody opening. So ring, 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 birth, 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 right? There's a bloody passageway here. Okay, so then we're going to eat. We're not going to go into this. And I am speeding along a little bit because I feel like there's a lot to go over, but we are going to have time for the conversation. Okay, so now you know that there's fire involved, and I'm not going to go into that in terms of the meat being roasted, no water, no boiling. And we're going to verse 11. and we went over this last time. 2, verse 11. V'kacha tochlu oto ma'nechem chaburim na'alechem v'raglechem u'makelchem b'yadchem v'achaltem oto b'chipazon pesach hu la'adonai. This is how you shall eat it, your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat hurriedly. It is a Passover offering. There is no time, right? You've got to be ready for this, right? There's no time, there's no control. So what's going to happen? 12, Avarti, Be'eretz Mitzrayim, Alayla Hazel, Behiketi, Kol B'chora, Be'eretz Mitzrayim, Be'adam Be'ad Behema, B'chol Elohei Mitzrayim, Sesh Batim, Amiyarai. Okay, 12. For then I will go through the land of Egypt and strike down every male firstborn in the land of Egypt, both human and beast, and I will mete out punishments to all the gods of Egypt. Okay, so brutal and cruel, and we're going to get into what happens to the firstborn of Egypt in a little while. Okay, the next verse. V'haya hadam lachem la'ot al habatim asher atem sham v'ra'iti et hadam upasachti alechem lo yeh bachem negev l'mashchit v'hakoti be'eretz Mitzrayim. And the blood on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Jessica, you can take that Chumash if no one's using it, and we're in Exodus 12. Okay, so now we're going to skip a little bit. So we're going to, 7 days, unleavened bread. And what I want to go to is here, 21. So again, the details for the first Seder is outlined in this chapter, and also, I'll tell you 1 second, and the fact that there should be no leaven found. And now we're going to look at Exodus 12, verse 21, in the same text, same passage. ויקרא משה לחוז את בני ישראל ויאמר עליהם משכו וקחו לכם צאן ומשפחותיכם ושחטו הפסח. So Moses then summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, go pick out lambs for your families and slaughter the Passover offering. Okay, now this is going to be crucial, the next verse. L'kachtem agudot ezo. Take a bunch of hyssop. Tevaltem badam asher basaf. And dip it in the blood that is in the basin. Sorry. V'higatem el hamashkof ve'el shtei hamezuzot ben adam asher basaf va'atem lo tetu ish mipetach beito ad boker. So take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that's in the basin, and apply some of the blood. There's already water in the basin, so there's now a bloody water mix. And apply some of the blood that is in the basin to the lintel and the 2 doorposts. None of you shall go outside the door of your house until morning. So this bunch of hyssop in 22 is also instrumental in the healing of the one who has a skin affliction. And also there is blood sprinkled in that, right? Which we're going to get into. Okay, and then verse 23, Va'avar Adonai lingof et Mitzrayim, v'ra'a et hadam al hamashkof, al shtei hamezuzot, v'pasach Adonai al hapetach, v'lo yitena mashchit lavo el batechem lingof. Adonai, when going through to smite the Egyptians, will see the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts. Adonai will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter and smite you. Okay, we're going to go a little bit more into the symbolism in a minute, but first I want to show you 2 other things. Exodus 11, 5. So this is really interesting. It says, Meit kol b'chor be'eretz Mitzrayim, and every male firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die is the typical translation, but that would involve vayamot kol b'chor. Meit kol b'chor really should be translated, every male firstborn in the land of Egypt are dead. They are dead. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the firstborn of the slave girl who's behind the millstone and all the firstborn of the cattle. one more verse, I'll do a little explaining and open things up and then carry it a few steps further. Kaddish, and then Shemot, Exodus 13 now. Verse 2. Kaddish li kol b'chor. Let me just check with Zoe. Zoe, I just got a request to unmute. Should I unmute here? Or we're good?
Yes, can we try that? Is that all right? I'm going to mute the live stream.
Okay, now I've unmuted.
That's making an echo.
Well, she might.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's any better, actually.
Oh, is
It sounds like there's two devices on.
You may have unmuted the wrong device.
Sorry, Rabbi Dan, could you unmute your close-up computer one more time?
it's unmuted now.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. I think, unfortunately, the open book live stream is the best microphone for now. Sorry about that.
So I
Thank
should mute
you.
myself? Okay.
Yes, please. And then could you unmute that open book live stream, the other camera? Sorry, thank you so much.
How's this now?
I think that's the only other option, so we'll keep it on that. Thank you.
Do I need to speak more loudly or that's not going to help?
Way better.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Okay, so in Exodus 13:2, God says, consecrate to me every male firstborn, human and beast, the first male issue of every womb among the Israelites is mine. Kaddish kol b'chor, Peter kol rachem b'nei Israel ba'adam uva be'ema lihu. Okay, so we've talked before about the splitting of the Reed Sea and the plagues, or the splitting of the Reed Sea being like a birth canal and the plagues being like birth pangs. But here something else has gone on. The Israelites themselves are kind of doing a ritual, or so I am sort of repeating the theory of Rabbi David Foreman, who's the source again you have at the end of the page. This ritual itself is creating a birth canal. And again, it's crucial that every person of the community participate in this ritual feast and in this ritual in order to be born as part of the community. And the fact that the Egyptians don't create a birth canal means they will not be born. And for them, it's kind of stillbirth. Mates kol b'chor, right? Every male firstborn, right, are dead. They're dead. Because there's no birth ritual going on for them. And if you think about the imagery associated with the Pharaoh, the hardened heart, and there's this fabulous midrash that my friend Rabbi Sharon Cohen-Hansfeld reminded me of this morning that we'll look at for a second. This is Shemot Rabbah 9:8, towards the third from the end of your page. And for those of you who don't have this,
Can we have that?
it's not there. Sorry. I don't know. What it says is, it describes Pharaoh as going out in the morning to the water, and he would only go out to the water in the morning. Why? Because this wicked man would praise himself, saying that he was a god and didn't need to empty out his hollow spaces. So he would go out secretly in the morning, and the hour of his need, you should go find him. Wow. So in other words, Pharaoh doesn't want to be porous. Pharaoh doesn't want to acknowledge that Pharaoh has openings. Pharaoh wants to harden, make his heart rigid, be impervious. And that's kind of the opposite of a birth image, right? You need to open in order to allow that process to happen psychologically, spiritually, physically. Okay, so I threw a lot at you, and we didn't even get to the connection with the Mitzvah, the one who has a skin affliction. But I'm going to stop my share and take questions and comments. either in the room
Can you
or
explain about what this means about emptying out his house?
going to the bathroom.
I guessed that, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah. I wouldn't do that. Oh my God, I see nobody's raising their hand, which is unprecedented. One person's raising their hand. I say it's unprecedented. Bob.
So the thing that baffles me is the firstborn of the cattle. What is that all about?
I think that, why does the firstborn of everything belong to God? And even the firstborn of the cattle? Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
for a plague on the cattle.
a plague on the cattle. I mean, the cattle are guilty of something? Really?
No, they're not. They're not guilty of something. I would say, so I get stuck on these questions because I think this is a literary piece and not a logical piece. Literary, not logical. So it's, in other words, it's just another way to say that everything belongs to God. And if you refuse God, and if you kill babies, right, as the Pharaoh did at the beginning of this book, then God's going to take it from you. God's going to take from you what you were withholding. So, Bob, I have no answer for you, in other words. All I'm going to say, my only answer is I suggest we read it literarily and not logically. And that the text will yield more if we do so.
Okay.
That makes sense.
All right.
Barbara Cecil says maybe to create a food store. Okay, Alana.
I just, Shabbat Shalom, just a brief comment. I'm imagining that, as we're getting this powerful image of the Jewish people themselves as a birthing woman's body, that probably the Zohar or other Jewish mystical texts could leap off from this as a way of really describing the emergent Jewish people in this embodied, in this woman, in a metaphor, an image that is an embodied pregnant woman. It just seems like a really beautiful metaphor, an image, to hold with us.
So the Zohar or the Kabbalah or Alana Kodman could have a great time with that image. Yeah. And to me, it speaks to the birth process that I think underlies the structure of existence. Like for human beings, either you go forward or you don't. But if you don't, you're going to feel plagued, right? If you don't, then you're going to be sort of not quite alive. And it takes this tremendous surrender, which, we're loath to do. And I think everything in society points us towards control as opposed to surrender. Paul, yeah.
In that context of what Ilana said,
Yeah.
it makes me think in a different way about the Red Sea, the waters breaking, at the instant before birth.
Yeah. That's also a birth canal.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The Red Sea, that splitting open is really, it's another birth image. Absolutely. Okay, so here's the lineup. And people who have already spoken, if you can bring down your hand so I don't get confused. Richard, Paul, Ariella.
I'm fascinated by the fact that the word you just used to describe the 10th plague is used nowhere else but in a description of the skin disease in Metzorah. So there's something about skin, about the covering of a body that is treated differently in these two places. In Metzorah, it's really a healthcare thing. It's a question of how do you cure it? In the 10th plague, it's not curable.
It's used in that parsha, and those parsha is how do you heal it?
Yeah, and in this parsha and Exodus, it's not curable. It's an indication of the very covering of the Egyptian society is corrupt and incurable. And in fact, the Pharaoh goes down to the waters to try to relieve himself in the morning, thereby spoiling the very waters that you mentioned were also in the same place where the are also talked about in the laver, that is used in the making of the blood that goes on the lintel. So it's like the very water of Egyptian life, like in the plagues, is blood contaminated.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
very blood, which is our symbol for life itself, is contaminated. So all the symbolism used in Exodus is symptomatic of problems. Those same symbols used later in Metzorah are symbols of potential cure or health, blood.
Beautiful.
And it's fascinating that the same word is used to echo phenomena which are so totally different and differently descriptive of the cultures involved.
It is fascinating, and get this connection that I just came upon this morning. Is there a connection, at least not in terms of word root, but in terms of sound, between Mitzorah and Mitzrayim? That there's something about that affliction, which means that you're sort of still living in Mitzrayim. Okay, so I'm going to go on now to Paul. Thank you, Richard.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Great to see you.
And you. I am, to extend the metaphor of the Passover as a birthing process, I am reminded that God is manipulating Pharaoh. It could have been easy God could have just allowed the Israelites to leave, but it was laborious and deliberately so. And the ultimate project is birth. But what is it what does birth mean in this context, which I believe it's the birth of the Israeli nation, the culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And God recognized that the antecedent to the development of a culture would be great pain. Labor was required as the immediate antecedent to the development of a culture. Hence, the plague process was necessary, and God made it so.
Wonderful. So great labor, great suffering, and a great deliverance. Thank you. Ariella, great to see you here.
Sorry, I'm not on screen yet. So I'm obsessing about the cows for a second.
We have to.
I'm curious about it. So I did a little research.
Great.
And
5 minutes.
so I was thinking that I was going to find that cows were sacred in ancient Egypt. So I did find that. So there are a couple of things. There are some gods and goddesses that were sacred cows, and most importantly, they were connected to female fertility, and including the mother of Pharaoh. So on the one hand, you have, right. So on the one hand, they provided meat and milk and served as working animals. So I'm thinking of that as, let's put sanctions on certain political leaders right now. And we say, oh, well, we're going to get them through economic means. And I was thinking, well, maybe God is saying, hey, listen, I'm not even just going to get you. I'm going to destroy your fundamental economics, which is a big deal. And the second half of it, this idea that you're going to get Pharaoh where it really hurts, you're going to get his mother. And so that there are these fertility issues and the mother issues, and then that takes us back to your birthing issue. So there are a lot of symbols of the calf and the cow, and then we somehow tie that to the, at the end, what do the Jews do? They make this golden calf. So there's something about the cow specifically. It doesn't say, I'm going to get your donkeys.
Yes, great, Ariella. And thank you for doing that research. That really enriched the conversation. And I saw Jay said, is that where sacred cow comes from? That sounds reasonable, but I don't know.
I think I can do that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna call on a few more people. We're gonna take 5 more minutes of comments, and then we're gonna go on because I really want to get to more of these connections and the connection to the Mitzvah. Okay, so I see Roberta Aluma Nehemiah. So please be concise, so hopefully everyone will have time to speak. Hi, Roberta.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom. Okay, I'll try and be concise because I'm putting together 3 different streams connected to what you raised about the collective, that we're given these instructions in the desert, and it's somehow connecting our freedom to the collective freedom. It's like the connection of individual freedom to collective freedom. And I'm thinking in the world right now, right, we are, the Jewish people are being directly affected by 2 insane outbreaks of violence in Ukraine and Palestine. And that there's a teaching in Torah here that respecting the nationhood of people, even those we consider to be enemies, that until we do that, the world will be so full of chaos that we will not be safe. And I'm connecting that to the Haftorah, to Malachi, that the whole point of this is to create something that turns the hearts of the children to the parents and the hearts of the parents to the children. That's what we're supposed to be doing with these Passover rituals of gathering the families, that everyone in the world has to have the opportunity to create a nation that turns their hearts and respects their own ancestors, even Putin, even the people killing us in Tel Aviv. And I think there's some deep, deep Torah for us here. That's what's happening for me.
Okay, wow, thank you so much, Roberta. Okay, thank you. Sorry, some technical thing. Yeah, so you're saying that not only is this a sort of symbolic moment for the Israelites, but it sort of has implications for everyone else in the world. This kind of birth process.
For what is needed to have freedom, that everyone's freedom is connected with everyone else's. Yeah.
And Paul's comment comes to me, that laborious process of becoming like a nation, but a nation who stands at Sinai and respects, right, the ethics of others. So, okay, Luma.
Hi, I'm seeing something I've never seen before. I know you're trying to connect Mitzorah with Mitzrayim, and when you said that, I saw something. And what I saw was Mitzrayim, we always talk about being constrained and being in between. And Mitzorah is something that comes from underneath the skin, very deep. So something is caught under the skin of someone of Mitzorah. And when you're in Mitzrayim, you're also caught. So I'm wondering, I'm curious if anyone else has seen that or if that's ever been a connection made, but it's curious to me.
I like the connection. I'm going to let it stand. And then maybe when we get to the Mitzorah, we'll figure out some connections. So that sense of being caught and being in the liminal place. Okay.
Under, like underneath, hidden, something hidden.
Something hidden that's sort of a miss or a lie. Is that what you're saying, Aluma?
No, I'm saying it's something very, very deep that has to be discovered, brought out, and freed.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, Jessica, did you want to make a comment?
I have a skin affliction, and I'm thinking that everything I've ever heard about skin afflictions is it's the body releasing, the thing that's hidden is coming out. That it's the skin is releasing the toxin. I've been thinking about that lately. I have a bug bite. So, but it feels like it just keeps on, whatever toxicity got into my system, it keeps coming out. And then in terms of the narrow place, it's like we're trying to get out. So it's about the exodus of this from our bodies or us from the narrow place.
Could people hear that, by the way? Did everyone hear that? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. That's yeah, I like the way you extended Aluma's comment. Thank you. Okay, Nehemiah, and then we're going to go back to the text.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Shabbat Shalom. I want to go to pile on what Roberta and Paul and other people said. And I'm going to skip the skin to go to what I believe is the heart. The heart, for my belief, is that we are starting our journey to freedom. And Pharaoh can do tshuva, but the drama is needed. So he doesn't do tshuva like Paul. So God loves to create drama in the world, even now. So we have a way to have Chavlei Mashiach and to go to spirituality. So what happened is it's a journey. And when we get to the promised land, it's still not the promised land because we didn't find freedom. You get the state of Israel and there's still problem. So until the individual, one by one, win the Pharaoh in our heart, the ego, completely, which I believe and you don't maybe, then there is total freedom. And then you can spread the freedom to others.
Nehemiah, I love that. I think it's really powerful. Thank you. And I will just add that I think that what these texts are pointing us towards, and we'll see more of it, is that part of uprooting the Pharaoh in each of our hearts is becoming a collective. Like I don't think we can forget the collective here. So thank you. Wait, so I'm going to call on you after we do a few more texts. There we go. Share my screen. Okay. All right, so now let's look at a few images of the Mitzvah. Okay, we're actually doing okay. So first from the last parsha, which I find is such a heartbreaking image, but I think it kind of personalizes and dramatizes the experience of being a Mitzvah. What did that mean? You know, what does it mean to be a quote unquote leper or someone who's designated with a skin affliction? So the priest will examine him if the swollen affection on the bald part in the front or at the back of his head is white streaked with red, like the leprosy of body skin in appearance. So the priest examines him. V'ra'a oto hakohen v'hinei se'et hanega levana adam demet. I love that word. Bikarchto o bigabachto kemar'et sara'at or basar. He is a leprous man. So the priest looks at that and then makes a diagnosis or designates him in a specific way. He is a leprous man. He is impure. The priest shall pronounce him impure. So he is impure, and then the priest calls him impure. He has an affection on his head. Isaruahu tamehu. So he is designated as impure, even though I don't think that's the best translation of tameh, but it's as good as we have at the moment. He's one in a condition of not being able to go into the sanctuary and make an offering. Tameh it enu hakohen. So the priest, it's interesting the Hebrew here because it's almost like the priest makes him as one tameh, berosho nig'o. Okay, so now here's the heartbreaking verse. As for the person with a leprous affection, the clothes shall be rent. Sorry, these two verses. These two verses are the heartbreaking. Shall be rent, the head shall be left bare, and the upper lip shall be covered over, and that person shall call out, impure, impure. So these are the signs of a mourner, right? The rent clothes, the bare head, the upper lip covered over. These are ancient signs of a mourner. V'hatzarua asher bo hanega bigadav yuyu frumim v'roshet yeh parua v'al safam ya'ateh v'tamei tamei. So he needs to call out impure because he's a primary source of impurity. If anyone comes into contact with him, they will become impure. It's almost like being in contact, like if you're in a tent, in a home with a dead body, everything in that room or in that house becomes impure. So he has that same power as if he's dead. The person shall be impure as long as the disease is present. Being impure, that person shall dwell apart in a dwelling outside the camp. So kol yemei asher haneda bo yitzma tamehu badad yoshev michutz lamachaneh moshavo. So this is really heartbreaking that he sits alone. And it's interesting because in the book of Echad, the book of Lamentations, Israel is described in the wake of the destruction of the temple as sitting alone and isolated apart. So remember, if we go back to the Korban Pesach, right, that's about making one into part of a nation. And here is the opposite. When you have an affliction, you're separated, you're isolated from the community until you are made pure again. Okay, we're going to skip one text, and we're going to go back to it in a minute, because I'm going to look at another image of being impure or afflicted with leprosy. So if you recall, if you've studied this before, in Numbers, right, Miriam and Aaron speak critically about Moshe, and God is furious with them, and Miriam is punished perhaps because she's a woman or perhaps because she instigates the conversation. It's not clear. But what I want to look at specifically is that she's afflicted with sora'at and how that sora'at is imaged. It's really interesting. And I think it will connect to these other passages. Okay, so as the cloud withdrew from the tent, there was Miriam stricken with snow white scales. Really interesting, right? That image. I don't know exactly what the scales are, but we can use our imaginations to visualize. When Aaron turned toward Miriam, he saw that she was stricken with scales. It's interesting to have the specific subjective view of her brother Aaron here. Va'anan sar me'al ha'ol v'hinei Miriam mitzorat ka'ashaled v'yifen Aaron el Miriam v'hinei mitzorat. Okay, so then Aaron says to Moses, "Oh my Lord, account not to us the sin which we committed in our folly." So Aaron's clearly upset. I mean that one in Hebrew, but I'm going to read the next one in Hebrew English. So look at this imagery. Let her not be like a stillbirth, which emerges from its mother's womb with half its flesh eaten away. Verse 12. Al na tehi kamet asher b'tseito rechan imo v'yeachel chatzi b'saro. So there's something here about the way the Mitzorah is described, and it's nowhere else described in such detail, that it's like a stillbirth. And what a heartbreaking image, right? Which emerges from its mother's womb with half its flesh eaten away. So remember, I sort of learned this sort of, bigger literary associations, this bigger frame from Rabbi David Foreman. He says that maybe the last plague was actually leprosy, quote unquote, was actually becoming a Mitzorah. Or a different way to say it, the way I would say is, perhaps and I kind of said this before, it's about being stillborn, right? It's an interrupted birth. It's a tragically interrupted birth. Okay, so now let's look at the healing of the Mitzorah, and then I'll open things up again. I know there's a lot here. Okay, so actually I'm just going to pull it down for parallels. So here in the healing, there are two birds, right? And it's interesting. Two live pure birds, right? Cedar wood. So the cedar wood, the azov, is used also in the rite of the Paschal Lamb to sort of paint the blood, and it's used here as well. And hyssop. The two live birds, Rabbi David Foreman draws a parallel between the Israelites who are going free, right, leaving Egypt, and one of the birds will go free, and the sacrifice bird, which is parallel to the Egyptian firstborn. Okay, so here we have one of the birds slaughtered over fresh water in an earthen vessel. So we've got the blood and the water, and remember the bloody Nile. And taking the live bird along with the cedar wood, the crimson stuff, and the hyssop, and dip them together with the live bird and the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the fresh water. Okay, then sprinkling it 7 times on the one to be purified with the eruption and effect the purification, and then he shall set the live bird free in the open country. Okay, the one to be purified shall wash those clothes, shave off all hair, and bathe in water, and then shall be pure. So that person who was so tragically separated from community is now restored to the community. Well, not yet. After that, the camp may be entered. But one must remain outside one's tent 7 days. So another 7 days. And remember, Miriam was also outside of the camp for 7 days, at which point she was gathered to her view. Okay, I think basically that's the basic frame and the basic details, and I know what people want to speak, so I'm stopping my screen share, and we're going to end with one more text. So we have Razel, Beth, Barbara, Jay, Marilyn. I don't know if we're going to have time for any others. We'll see. Okay, so if you raise your hand, just know I might not call you. And feel free to drop your comments in the chat. Hey, Razel, you've been waiting for a while.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the notion of playing with the words. I have this book here by Jonathan Kliegler in Woodstock, and I found his parsing of Mitzorah interesting. You'll indulge me if I read it rather than say it in my own words. It is interesting to note that ancient rabbinic commentators also assign a metaphoric meaning to this affliction. Using wordplay, the rabbis work Mitzorah, the person afflicted with spiritual disorder, into Motzi Ra, which means one who draws out the bad. In the rabbinic telling, a person who is Mitzorah has habitually spoken in hurtful ways, slander, tale-bearing, rumor-mongering, that is, any use of language that can damage or destroy another's reputation. For the rabbi, Sara'at is the physical symptom of a spiritual disease. The Mitzorah draws out the bad rather than the good, using language to break down rather than build up. We could say that the person has loose lips, and we talk about the purification, something about covering the lips. So we could say that's an expression we use. That person has loose lips and cannot contain himself adequately. But I couldn't contain myself is their excuse. Conscience, empathy, and thinking before one speaks are all necessary preconditions for the experience of holiness. Those who leak harmful words have lost their integrity. Holiness and wholeness have been lost, and the divine presence cannot manifest. Therefore, the person needs to be taken away from the community, not as a punishment, but as a retreat to reflect on their own behavior.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So I want to say a couple of things about that. So this, the rabbinic take on Mitzorah is that it's an affliction because of gossip, as Rachel just read. I want to add one more thing about that. So Rabbi David and I were studying yesterday, and we're talking about like why, what is it about a skin affliction? And there's something about gossip. We're not understanding that we share the same root of existence. Like as if there are, like what we do is we end up using language to raise up rigid barriers between us. That person is outside the camp. That person's no good. That person's overweight, they must not be controlling their eating. All kinds of stuff in a way that we set other people apart from the camp. And then we ourselves, our own barriers or boundaries, the skin is what mediates us with the outside world, becomes afflicted. So thank you, Rachel, for introducing that. Okay, I'm going to ask people to be brief so that we can get to one more text and a wrap up. So at one point, please. Beth.
Shabbat Shalom. I was struck by the afflicted person calling out Tameh, Tameh. And until today, I've always thought that as a kind of cruel obligation. And yet, if we look at it metaphorically, we're all constantly calling out Tameh, Tameh through the shadow self that other people can see, but we can't, through our body language. And I think this is speaking to the fact that we're carrying around affliction and we're blasting it out loud, even if we don't realize that we're blasting it out loud.
So we're like, keep away, I can't bear intimacy because I'm impure. That's very powerful. Thank you, Beth. Wow. Okay, Barbara.
Well, I just had to speak today because this was my parsha from last year when I did my bar mitzvah, remember?
Yeah. How could I forget? I was like, oh yes.
Right. So, and in case anybody wants to hear it, I think it's somewhere in the Romemu site. It was a flute. I actually did a piece of music, create a piece of music with voice and electronics and flute. So it's interesting. Thank you. It's so interesting to hear all these different takes. And who is that? Razel. I basically last year looked at that, at what gossip does to the community and how how you can be excluded from the community. But what I was thinking about today, because you can always, it's so great to have a different take on it this year, was when you were talking about mourning and renting of fabric and what that really means, and how grief manifests itself in our bodies and in our communities and in our lives. And when you think about what's happening in the world today and how grief is manifesting in these just horrible things happening, long festering grief, in a simple way, I have psoriasis and I manifest grief in all sorts of ways. But the way we collectively do it as a culture seems to be so manifest today. So, that's all I have to say. Yeah.
Do we feel our grief? And to go back to the earlier point, do we feel our porousness and our vulnerability? And finally, are we allowing ourselves to be born?
You sure do during the.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to go to Sharon, Jay, Marilyn, and if there's time, Reb Zusha and Kathy Lynn.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you. My mind and heart are going in all kinds of directions, but I wanted to just pick up on something around the relationship between the Mitzorah and the Motzi Shem Ra, the Mitzorah and this idea of Lashon Hara, but tie it back to what we were saying earlier about birth and Paul's comment about the necessity for pain in birth, which, by the way, applies both to Mitzrayim and to Gan Eden, right? Where it says, it's going to hurt. There's going to be pain involved. And I'm generally very reluctant to go with sort of spiritual or moral interpretations of illness. It makes me very nervous. Including this stuff around the Mitzorah. But what's striking me as I'm thinking about Lashon Hara, about really, that kind of corrosive speech and gossip, is that I think one of the ways that it works is that there's something that needs to come out, something that one feels one needs to get out, but wants to avoid the pain of direct conversation with the person who, so talking about them rather than with them. And it just strikes me that direct conversation is a kind of birth. It's painful, but it's generative. Something can be born out of that. Whereas the talking about is sort of easy and comfortable and quote unquote, kind of pain-free, but nothing is born from it. So that's what's striking me.
I love that, Sharon. And not only is it pain-free to talk about someone behind their back, it's also pleasurable. It's like a little gossip fest feast, right? Like, woo, did you hear the what about, right? It's like really enticing and kind of sensational. Yeah. Wow. So to sort of sacrifice that pleasure, to go to the pain of talking to someone directly. Wow, that's big. Thank you so much. Okay, so Jay and Marilyn, and I'm going to go to one more text, and if there's time, I will call the other people next.
like you and Beth, I was struck by Leviticus 13:45 and the description of the leper, for lack of a better word. Rabbi Sachs draws on this old, well-known distinction of a shame society versus a guilt society. And he says this is one of the few times where we are, in fact, a shame society. And what strikes me about the priest declaring the person impure and then the person declaring themselves impure is this almost internalization of the stigma, owning that stigma by the person, which strikes me as a certain kind of pathos as well. And I'm just putting it out there. What does that mean? What does that mean that our tradition actually asks us to internalize the stigma and the ostracism until we are accepted back?
Great question. And I will say that what saves me a little bit is, and we've been learning this in adult B'nai Mitzvah, we actually learned it last year in adult B'nai Mitzvah, Mary Douglas's analysis of Leviticus stresses that as shameful and as isolated as this is, the rite is all about restoring the person to community. And what happens in our own communities, let's say with people who leave prison and try to get integrated into the world, it doesn't happen. Or someone who's been in, often like in a psychiatric facility, like we end up isolating and ostracizing people for the rest of their lives as if it's a permanent condition. And the Leviticus is only a fluid, temporary condition, as painful as it is. So yes, and now, but yes, definitely yes, the pain.
Oh, wow. Okay. A lot of themes circling around. I'm really into what I wrote it in the text too about the separation, the us and the them, which of course happens in the plagues. And I was even thinking of the word Kaddish, like holiness, which is also to set aside. And I'm thinking about our human need or something to separate in order to make something holy, the separation that's needed and that is in a way unhealthy. And I go right back to the Garden of Eden where, they eat from the apple and then they hide. And there you start with the shame and the blame and the separation and a belief that that Adam and Eve or we could actually hide from God. And of course, what does God do? God makes them skin at that point. So it sort of starts in this whole, okay, you want separation, but that separation leads to maybe shame and blame and the need for an enemy and the need to put a plague on someone else so you can say, I am saved and I am a nation and you're not part of me, so that if there's a way, like Beth said, that we can pass over that and everyone can know that they're interconnected and still be able to hold our own. So that's maybe a wish and a blessing or something.
And I think separation is difficult no matter how you slice it, because even if we are accepting and acknowledging that we're participate in the same root of existence, there's loss, there's death, there's illness. I mean, there's all kinds of, it's not the pain of shame, blame, and separation, it's the pain of connection. Okay, with that, I want to go to one more text and give a little kavanah for Pesach. So when we were studying this morning, Sharon pointed out this amazing text from Jeremiah about being stillborn. It's the second to last source of the page, Jeremiah 20, and people can read it in Hebrew. Accursed be the day that I was born. Let not the day be blessed when my mother bore me. Accursed be the man who brought my father the news and said, a boy is born to you, and gave him such joy. Let that man become like the cities which the Lord overthrew without relenting. Let him hear shrieks in the morning and battle shouts at noontime, because he did not kill me before birth, so that my mother might be in my grave, and her womb big with me for all time. Why did I ever issue from the womb to see misery and woe, to spend all my days in shame? So this is all about the pain of existence and the pain of being a prophet. And how can I don't know about you, but I would feel like, oh my God, at least at this moment, I don't really want to be. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this situation. I don't want this. And other times I feel conflicted. Like, oh, this is great, but my whole self maybe isn't in it. I had this amazing dream recently where my whole body was participating in something, but my head refused to enter the experience. So, it's like, do we really accept being born? Does it take a lifetime to really acknowledge and understand and accept that we're here to be born again and again, and Pesach is our birth ritual, our birthright into the collective, into the collective. And it gives us a way, perhaps, to more deeply accept and acknowledge that birth, which is our legacy, our heritage, and so to speak, our birthright. So I'm sorry, I can't take more hands now. I'm really sorry. Put your comments in the chat or hang out here. But what I'd like to bless us all with this Pesach is the willingness to be born and to be born into a collective so that we all feel fundamentally and fundamentally and radically connected to each other, to our own community, to our own people, and of course to all human beings in this holiday of freedom. Thank you, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. Hang out and talk. I'm going to leave, and we'll see you soon.